Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back after lunch. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Ethnographic entanglements. From this conversation, hopefully, we'll glean some knowledge of what that could mean. But what I want to really do with this conversation is bring the focus of attention down to our three artists and filmmakers' practices. And to really think about how subjects of ethnography brush up against some of the things they do with their work, to investigate their work in all its forms, and also to think about truth and fiction and the playful approach we can have to subjects around the ethnographic. Laura is an artist and filmmaker. She presents, for the most part, in screenings and oftentimes in a gallery-based exhibition format. She also writes. Some of those writings might come up in conversation as well. Minia works with moving image as part of a broader practice. Her practice is often exhibited in galleries alongside physical attributes such as sculpture, drawings, and in large-scale installations. Basir works with moving image in photography and installation, and his work also is rooted firmly in the gallery. So three positions, three very different voices. So what we're going to do today is we're going to hear from each of our participants. It's a great honor to have this opportunity to listen to them talk about their work, after which we're going to dig a little deeper into some of the things that come up from their presentations. And we'll open up to you all for questions as well. Thank you to the Sharjah Film Platform for inviting us all, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. We're going to do the presentations in order as you see them on the screen. So Minia is first, followed by Basir, and then Laura, after which we'll talk a little bit and open up to you as well. Okay.
Do you sing the same song alone and with others?
Toli, toli, montrez-moi chimé à casa en main. Toli, toli, montrez-moi chimé à casa en main. Toli, toli, montrez-moi qui j'en pouvine côté site.
Doux coup, ou tellement douce. The fruit lays on the floor. The peel is rubbing itself inside, while the outside is put out, vulnerable. We see the seeds, here, Leeward Islands. Toli Toli reads time. Possessiveness. Here, shadow possess the power of naming.
Hello, my name is Minia. Thank you for being here and thank you for the invitation. Um, can I have the PowerPoint directly? So start. I go straight. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I am from Guadeloupe. Guadeloupe is a French Caribbean island. There are different islands called Guadeloupe in the word, so that's why I'm precising which one is mine. So just quickly to localize where we are. Guadeloupe belongs to France since 1635 and has never had the possibility of being independent. It's a political situation that is very stable, and even if we had revendication of independence now, since the 60s, the situation is very, very, stable. So in the identity, the political situation of, well, being in the Caribbean but belonging still to another country creates tensions. And so in my work, I'm exploring those tensions. I studied fine art. I'm not into cinema. So as you could see, my interest is really into taking text, images, and sound and weave them together. I'm gonna explain to you why. But just very briefly, just to situate a bit Guadeloupe, this political situation also brings a lot of privilege in the level of life. So compared to the other island of the Caribbean, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Saint Martin, they have quite a higher level of life. So it's privilege, it's also a lot of assistance, and it's also tensions, of course, resistance and resilience. So in my work, I try to navigate through all those, to the relation that we have with the situation that is really not really often spoken. My relation with space is really linked with the fact that Guadeloupe is an archipelago. So in my installation, I don't use hierarchy. I'm more interested by the relation between objects than by objects themselves. So in what you just seen, I'm gonna go really faster than that. So this is a video that was what is called Toli Toli. You've just seen the first minutes, and that video is part of a video installation that I've shown in the Berlin Biennial last year. And for that installation, I used the weaving that is traditionally used to make fish traps. My relation with weaving is really related with speaking and with to put words, to put a narrative to something. And in Guadeloupe, the situation is not really spoken about. It's really a flat, let's say, communication theme. Even it's really interesting to understand the present and the situation and how coloniality has impacts in our lives and how are we resistant or resilient with the situation. There is really for me a lack of ways to tell how are you in a double consciousness situation in terms of space, because we are in Guadeloupe in the Caribbean but projecting ourselves constantly outside. And so this tension, what is it? What people are reacting to it, how this is influencing their lives. And so my relation with space and with narratives come from this tension. And so the video you've seen is connected with weaving of the bamboo. And this technique has almost completely disappeared from Guadeloupe, but because now people are using the metal structures that you've seen earlier. But for me, it was really interesting to re-find this technique that is very common, I think, all over the planet for fish trap and to make baskets and to re-give it another meaning and to interrogate the structure that we give to language. In Guadeloupe, we speak French, but we also speak Creole, and Creole has African roots and is an European-based vocabulary language. And so, yeah, in the video, what I'm doing, so again, you've just seen the 3 first minutes, and after that, it goes more and more into a more spatial exploration. What you're seeing is still the conception phase of the installation that was in Berlin, and then just gonna squeeze something, sorry. Yeah. And there we are at the Berlin Biennial. So the installation, the video installation was like that. So you could come to the space and pass through the bamboo weaving structures. The idea was to recreate the idea of a trap, but without really, but to create the idea of it, but actually you could, of course, pass fluently and watch the video through the weaving, through this weaving that is connected with language and with the possibility of speaking about a situation. How, yeah, with the time? Still good, okay. And I squeezed so many things that now I'm a bit lost, sorry. And yeah, very important. So in the video, the video is about toli toli, the little insect that you've seen in the hand. So a toli toli is the caterpillar of a butterfly. Guadeloupe is called the butterfly in the imaginary for children. So all the video is about Guadeloupe itself and my relation with space in Guadeloupe, coming back after 12 years abroad. And so the video is a poem talking about how the toli toli allow you to project yourself in space and to realize where you are. Because the original song is Toli Toli, show me the way to, it's saying Toli Toli, show me the way to, I don't know, Dubai or New York or wherever. So when the kids pick the little caterpillar from the ground, put it like that, and then depending on where the tail is going, they decided to project themselves to another place. So then I found this little song that has completely disappeared now. Just my mom was singing to me once when she was gardening, and I found it really interesting to project and to question where we are and how do we relate now with space today. And I changed the lyrics. I changed also the projection. And so during all the videos, what is actually going on is a weaving between text, images, and sound, and the projection of space. Also in the installation, the shadow is very important. So when you go in the space, you have those projections that are on your skin and on the ground. And that is a main character of the poem. So yeah, my intervention is really, sorry, a bit discontracted, but what I wanted to do is, with the video, how can I question the space of Guadeloupe, but also question the space that the spectator is in? And in the video, you have those moments with the sudden colors, for example, that are made to reflect, to have a reflection on the spectator's color, on the spectator's body, sorry. So, yeah. In the video is a weaving of different layers. Maybe you can help me, Steven.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the piece in Berlin, I felt like I was put into a situation where I had to make some choices about how I engaged with the work. So I was confronted on the one hand by sculpture and on the other hand video, and I somehow had to find myself very physically within the space. So it wasn't a black box space in the sense that you were very much aware of your surroundings, yourself in the building, in front of the video, looking through the sculpture, being within the sculpture. And I think it was a really unique opportunity to kind of consider our relationships to these art forms, which might be considered traditional in some senses, but in other senses, they're very much brought into the present by this fact that you ask people, stay with this work for 10 seconds, stay with this work for 10 minutes. The video is 10 minutes long. Some people may have been there for half an hour before they realized the video was looping round. So I think it was, for me, a really unique experience to kind of think about myself as well as how I relate to these individual things. I think the subjective position you as an artist take is one part of the dialogue that perhaps also relates to the very unique and subjective perception of the viewer. And that's perhaps something we can come back to later if we're talking more in depth about some of those ethnographic connotations. I think it's a nice opportunity now just to pass over to Basir, and we'll hear about your work. As a unique kind of fact, Basir and Minia both presented in the Berlin Biennial, so the proximity of their works together is a nice coincidence for this panel discussion.
Hello, thank you so much. First of all, thanks to Sharjah Art Foundation for the invitation, and not just for the invitation, but also the greater contribution I think they had in my practice at various points. I'll be showing some of the works which I made in the last 10 years. This is, I think, the time, almost 10 years since I've been practicing work. And I try to sort of put everything together because I sometimes struggle myself to speak in other way about my work. Because I think all these things which I've been working on somehow connects to each other. But also at the same time, I do not have this one interest. I find it hard to say this is what I'm interested in. It changes, I believe. I think everybody thinks like this, but I think this is how my practice has been growing in the past 10 years, as I said. I was trained as a sculptor, self-taught sculptor, and like many artists from Pakistan, I had this very hardcore physical practice into making things. Before me, my brother and sister, my brother was a painter, and my father was a poet. They've all been struggling into making art, couldn't continue, and then I decided I want to be an artist. My mother said, it's a disastrous family. But somehow I think I'm amazed that I'm myself amazed that I've been able to continue making work from the last 10 years and surviving as an artist, but also that sort of put me in doubt all the time because I think my brother and sister were way more talented. So sometimes that helped me to sort of play outside of myself also as an artist and not to take myself too seriously. This is the first ever video work which I made, and I did many other sketches before, but I had this one moment I called John Baldessari moment where my hard drive got crashed, and I just have this one work where I started from, let's say. It's a work which it's called Man-Made. It's a person I found who never wore a three-piece suit in his life, and it's 30 minutes of him changing into clothes. I think the work still excites me because I don't know why I made this work. I know what the work is about, but I'm kind of not aware of the intentions. Why would I make something like this? But every time different answers comes when I think of it, and I think one of it is that I think I was also changing myself as an artist, going into the university, learning to speak into English, present my work, and also present myself as an artist also. And I think that transformation kind of I could trace back in this work somehow. And then there's a larger transformation. I looked through this work. It's called Landa Bazaar. It's a second-hand clothing market where the work was shot through a hidden camera. and it's a place where all these people are changing clothes on the street. It's called London Bazaar because of London. Before, clothes were coming from London, but now all the other developed countries and even little bit better countries, clothes come and people are wearing clothes on the streets. And I was sort of trying to record this transformation that takes place from people from one society and the clothes from the other society sort of merge into each other. And this was shown in Sharjah, Biennale in 2012. And then this is a work, it's called My Father. The person in the video is my father. Is usually shown in an iPhone screen or small screen, so the needle size is like really small. And I was, as I said, I was the youngest child in the family, and I was born when my father was 45 years of age. And while growing stronger or younger, I was seeing both of my parents getting older and weaker. And there was a lot of things which I had to sort of do with them still now, because when I live with them, dialing a phone number or doing something, and also sometimes the small act of putting thread into a needle. And I wanted to sort of create something very personal of that kind of a relationship which I have with them. And strangely enough, the work started from thinking about this idea of conceptual art, that conceptual art is about an idea, not about the execution. So it's something which he was able to do, and he know how to done, but somehow do not have struggles to put it into a needle. And then this is a work, it's called I'm on the side, you are on the other. It's a work shot at the Wagah border. It's a border between Pakistan and India, where every evening thousands of people gather, and there's a choreographed performance of both armies in the middle. And I only shot the crowds who are cheering, and there are usually, the ambience is sound and people speaking. And there are many spaces where I went as an artist, and I started to sort of reconsider them. And when I went to this place, I was thinking about that there's no third point of view to look at this whole activity. And because I think when we know the third point of view to see this craziness, then you can somehow figure out what's probably wrong or right, I don't know. So there's this installation which is like two screens very close to each other, and you as a person is sort of perform, taking one side or the other side to see the other side. And I think I created this work for myself, where I wanted viewer to be also part of it, and I could see it from the outside, them changing positions. A lot of the works which my practice goes through making work in the residencies. In 2012, I got a chance to go to, I have 5 minutes, Academy of Solitude. And that was the first time I left Pakistan. I didn't make any work, but I think I made myself. But what interesting happened within that time when I was first time leaving out, my whole family invited me to the dinner, like my extended family, because I was leaving outside, going to Europe, and also talking about the better side of the world, the other side. And also, my cousin was even told me to this extent, when you land in Germany, just throw your passport and just disappear, don't come back. Something like this. So it's all created this idea of imagination of the better world, which is on the other side of the world. And then I went there, and I got this news, interestingly, about these 21 men who were trying to go to Europe illegally, hidden in a container, and the container got lost in Iran. And they died out of suffocation. And then I started to articulate it, not just 21 men, but 22, including myself, and thinking about a possibility, how could I make this idea hope for this object, this container within the film, and then they carry this. This is how it's shown also with the same material. And this is a message to the sea I made in, as I said, there are many works I made at the residencies. It was interesting to go into a place, find yourself into a new context, and then see what you could possibly do. It's called A Message to the Sea, where the person, it's an area which was known for fishermen. Now it's for hotels and everything. I was also invited by the hotel. And sometime you see early morning, there are some people fishing, and the profession has gone away. So I want to sort of use my position as an artist to create certain dialogue between the sea and then going back to Pakistan on and off, I made many sketches, many things where I was interested. Because when I went back to Pakistan, I realized something has changed in my seeing to my own people. And I was interested in observing, using camera. And I would, in this one, I think this is what it's called Thank You for Coming. It's probably one of the big breakthroughs I had for myself as an artist, where I invited few people through a person, and I wanted to sort of record their interaction. But me, as an outsider with a camera, the structure which I was trying to build sort of collapsed. Everybody became very strange, very stiff, not talking, not smiling, not doing anything. And I started to use that into my benefit, and I think that work turned into a very strange thing, which I sort of later kept on using. And then I made many sketches. It's called Power Between Week. I had a car, I would go around and I would take people from the street if they would want to be part of the work. Most of the time, day workers who are on the street waiting for the work, and I would ask them to work in my films. Again, I was interested in seeing, so I would write a small narrative and make them perform. And here I realized that my past practice as a sculptor started to play a role where I am sort of forcing myself onto a narrative like a sculptor, like you're molding a shape or something. And that make really stiff, strange sort of interactions. I hope I could show these films to you. This is the work which I made in Brazil. It's a memory of an artist, Bakare Dealu, who died, who was supposed to go with me. And then I found out on the way his plane got crashed and he was not there. But there's this residency where the people are preparing for the house for somebody to come as an artist, and I was there, so I recorded them, and also the staff of the residency became sort of my actors. I went to Rijksacademy very recently, and Rijksacademy is the point where I really redefined, re-understood my own position as an artist. I was not interested into making things anymore. I wanted to create distance from my own work. Rijks is very proud. I don't know if some of you have visited. Rijksacademy is a big place, great, one of the best residencies. It's very proud of these industrial workshops where these artists are sort of creating objects, making works. And that also triggered my past often as a sculptor, but I couldn't make any work. So I thought of how do I position myself only as a thinker who can make work by thinking about things. And that's when I wrote a narrative and sending guidelines to Pakistan, to a production company, to make this work in my absence. These porters who are from the Lahore railway station carrying my personal belonging in the film moved the idea of the works towards me. So I became an initiator, and then the waiter who's waiting somewhere else for the work to arrive. And then this work sort of liberated me with a lot of restrictions as an artist, and I opened other possibilities. And this is the work which I made in Amsterdam, where I run a film as a procedure. The film is shot in 2 rooms simultaneously. I wanted to completely go out of my control, just draw a larger parameter in which actors, production team, and everybody perform for my work, and give me a chance to go back to my position as an observer and see films being made. This is the work called All Voices Are Mine, one of the very important work for me. It's funded by Sharjah Art Foundation. I got some money to make a film, and I went to this Lollywood film industry. It was in the 70s, one of the biggest film industries in the world, and now end up making 1 or 2 films. It's a Lahore-based film industry, 10 minutes away from my home where I grew up. And when the film industry has its downfall, my father was also, as a poet, was commissioned to write a song for the film. But the film was never made, and we grew up listening to that song, thinking about imagining in which context the song should be played. And then I started to think about all these skills, narrative stories, songs, or situations which might never become part of anything. Then I went there, I commissioned 1 day of activity of film. Other than asking actors to do this or that, I would ask them what they could do for the film. And then with my certain understanding, started to put them into an order. And in all the works, I think camera is on my side, where I wait for certain situations to occur, where actors become tired or get out of my narrative which I'm trying to build. This is the last work, and I think this is even further putting something, it's completely out of my comfort zone. I made this work 8-9 months back. I was not sure about this work. I kept it hidden, but then I showed it to some people who thought it's a very strong work, so I feel proud and I have a courage to show this work now. It's called Good Ended Happily. I commissioned a production company to record or to make scenes of death of Osama bin Laden's death, like when the operation ended and they are taking his body away. But there were 2 conditions which I gave them to. One was that everybody on the set, not 3 people on the set, like the director, cameraman, and the assistant would be wearing collar mics, so you listen them creating fiction. And the other thing was the camera would be constantly moving in this space, so the camera become more active, so everything is taking place for the camera. But what emerged out of it was, I think, this is the beauty of the works, that sometimes it surprises you, the method I'm interested in, that this cameraman who's holding camera, breathing, and then whispering to each other, then talking to actors to remain still, to perform dead, not to move, not to move, not to move, camera is coming towards you. Creating a sort of a very, creating a fiction through, creating a reality through a fiction, very strange mix of it. And I think, I believe this is the work which would help me to make the next work. Thank you so much.
Hi. My name is Laura Huertas Millan. I'm a Colombian and French filmmaker. I would like to thank the Sharjah Foundation and Gina for this invitation. I'm very honored to be here today with some artists, some of them who I know for quite a while. So I would like to talk today about a series of films very related to ethnography. So between 2009 and 2012, I developed a series around the notion of exoticism. We talked this morning about post-colonial anger. I think this series comes exactly from that place. The origin was a series of photographies that I encountered during a travel to Chile. But these photographs were taken in France, and they represented a group of Mapuches indigenous people who in the late 19th century and beginning of the 20th century were taken by force to Europe to participate in some events that spread out all over Europe. It was the human zoos that took place during the colonial exhibitions. So for these events, there were not only people from America, but also from several other continents, and it was, well, the images are pretty shocking, and I think these events, for me, had a very strong resonance in my work, because I realized that some places that I could go in France or in Paris were very haunted and marked by this colonial history. So when I started to look at those images and realized that while these indigenous people were taken to France to be exhibited in these human zoos, it was the same moment that in America they were literally hunted and there was an extermination going on. So this was something that really marked me. And I started to look at these images like how they were made and what forms these images contained. And it took me a while to start deconstructing the archetypes that were the basis of these representations. Some of these images came from postcards. And I was trying to look how these images were built. And I felt that the camera was always put in a confrontative position with the people who were represented. And there was always in the image something that was telling us that there was a difference between the people represented and the people having a look at these other people. So there was certainly a distance that was constructed by the image itself, a sort of irreversible separation between the one who sees and the one who's represented. It's not fortuitous that the images became postcards, because the way the image objectifies people become literally an image that is an object. I was also interested about how these images would not convey a sense of individual or personality traits, but consider the group as an homogeneous, something homogeneous with very stereotypical gender roles. So it was like these images were creating a fantasy of a foreigner identity, a sort of fiction that would be an exotic fiction and was very rooted to and linked to colonialism. Also, as I was saying, the background of these images was really important. One of the forms that would come back incessantly in the construction of these humans, those images, was the presence of architectural replicas. So I started to be interested about the construction of these places in France that were representations of tropical lands or tropics. And these places were very much made like patchworks or collage, linking forms from different countries that had nothing in common but just a sort of fantasy of being far away and being exotic. So I started to do more specifically a research on tropical greenhouses in France and botanical gardens. And one of the films that I made in very early on was this film, Journey to a Land Otherwise Known, that I finished in 2011. And it was made in a tropical greenhouse in Lille, in France. So the film is entirely shot in this place, and the place is used like a TV set of a fake jungle. So while the camera advances in a tropical landscape, which is all in between this greenhouse, a male voiceover describes in French the arrival to the so-called New World. So this idea of the New World is also a fiction that was created at this moment of encounter, because this world was not, of course, not new and had already knowledge and people and communities. So in this film, the voice narrates excerpts from canonical texts from the moment of the conquest and colonization of America. This text comes from scientists, conquistadors, travelers, missionaries who described America for an European audience during these colonial times. Also, the film is divided into chapters, like the literature of that time was. And it uses the cliches of those texts, like the arrival of the New World, the description of the native people, description of the animals and the plants. But in my film, everything happens in an enclosed space. Like, this jungle is not a reality, but it's more a construction and very artificial. So I'm going to show you the trailer of the film.
Les hommes et les femmes de ce pays sont aussi bien faits que ceux du nôtre. Seulement le soleil leur a donné une teinte brune. Ils vont absolument nus et ne se cachent pas les parties intimes. Ils n'ont pas de barbe, car ils se l'arrachent avec soin. Ils se parent aussi avec des plumes. Avant de passer outre, je crois devoir dire un mot du génie et du caractère de ces sauvages.
Yes, so I did this film. I was living in France for 10 years, and it was the time when Sarkozy was president, and it was the time when he was proposing to create a ministry of national identity. So I think in my film it was very important for me to deconstruct what is this idea of the national French identity, and evoking something that I feel is still very present in French culture, and it is this idea of a hierarchy between civilizations and civilizations which would be more civilized than others. So I think in my film the idea was really to expose like the roots of these figures that are still present in French politics today, and as well to consider the echoes of these inventions of that time, the savages, the New World, etc. So everything is made in France with European actors, and it's a sort of carnavalesque cannibalistic take on this colonial text. Also, to come back to ethnography, actually Jean Deléry, one of the authors that I used in this film, is for the other French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss, one of the first ethnographers. So I was very interested about how anthropology is actually very linked to this colonial process and how the anthropological gaze, was constructed with the gaze of these European travelers going to America, very much with their own fictions that were already existing and describing this world that they didn't know with these elements of these cultural elements and creating all these mythologies. So I would say that these first films that I made around with a critical take on ethnography and this anthropological language were very anchored, as I say, in a criticism and a form of anger and an uncomfortable position. And I was, of course, very inspired as well by post-colonial thinkers as Fanon, who we talked about him this morning, or Edouard Said, but also Oswald de Andrade and all the cannibalistic anthropophagous movement of the Brazilian modernism. So this exoticism series led me to think about the notion of ethnographic fictions. And I understood it in two different ways. On the one hand, if one considers ethnography as an ensemble of narratives that are rooted in colonialism, I think we can understand it as a form of fiction making. But on the other hand, some of the most interesting contemporary ethnographic practices have embraced a decolonial turn, and they have integrated the fiction language tools within their elaboration. So I'm talking about contemporary ethnographers like Viveiros de Castro, or people a little bit before like Jean Rouch or Trinity Minha, who have like deconstructed the very own language of ethnography, and some of them using fiction for that matter. So I began a PhD around this notion that I developed between Beaux-Arts de Paris and the Sensory Ethnography Lab at Harvard University. And always working with this idea of something that is at the same time a contradiction, but also can be a fertile ground for creation. And I started to integrate fiction in my own practice and to look at these contemporary approaches of anthropology, and which many of them using cinema in my own work. So I made a series of films in this in-betweenness with all these contradictions, and I would like to show you a second clip about another film that I made, which is called La Libertad.
¿Por qué nunca me casé? Pues que no, ya le conté que yo no digo de esa agua no he de beber. ¿Qué tal que apenas me voy a casar? ¿No es cierto? Bueno, no me casé tal vez. Pues porque no quise. O sea que me gusta mucho mi libertad. Se puede decir que amo mi libertad. Y al casarse, yo pienso que ya no es uno libre.
So, yes. The most commonly represented archetype of indigenous women in television, film, and popular media or culture is that of woman's maternity. The narratives are often heavily focused on the male figures, and the female presences have little opportunity to speak. They sometimes stand in the background of the action, they take care of the children, they're busy with domestic tasks. I felt another frequent cliché of Native women is their association with an exotic archetype of beauty. They are very eroticized, so the feminine presence is reduced again to the presence of a male figure or a male gaze. So these concerns were for me very present while I was filming with the Navarro family. They live in Santo Tomás Jaliesa in Oaxaca, Mexico. It's a Zapotec community. And I was able to meet this family of weavers through the Arquetopia Foundation, an art center which invited me for a 2-month residency in Puebla and Oaxaca. And this foundation has strong links with local artisans. The Navarros are a very respected actor of their community, not only on a national scale, but also international. Their weaving pieces are in museums all around the world, from Korea, in Japan, etc., and they have traveled a lot. The Navarros have built an economical and sustainable practice thanks to the backstrap loom that you saw in the clip, which is a pre-Hispanic weaving technique, and this technique was transmitted through women for most than 500 centuries, from mother to daughter. But nowadays, more and more men engage with this technique and also with craftsmanship. And for me, it was very surprising that from the first moments that we were engaging in conversations with the family, the reason for the weaving was freedom. So for me, when they were talking about freedom the first times, I was very surprised because this word can be understood in many different ways. It is used by politicians to engage in wars. So to me, it's a very complex word and difficult to give it a representation or even a meaning. But then when I started to spend time with the Navarros, I realized that freedom there is not an empty word, but it's a part of a constellation of practices on everyday basis and related to a form of ecology and community that is human and non-human, all gravitating around the loom and this craftsmanship. So I felt that freedom in that context is not only one gesture, but a network of things. And my film tried, without being literal or descriptive, to convey this sense of community. Also, just to finish, something that I noticed in my way of filmmaking is that at the beginning I felt I needed to create a very close proximity with the people that I was filming. And so I was doing a lot of close shots, and then I realized that during the shooting that lasted 2 months, I was able to pull away and to start to open the frame and to change my lenses. And I felt that finally freedom was my capacity, or perhaps the attempt to try to catch a vibratory movement that your eyes cannot see. So the camera became like an artifact that would help me to convey something that is not plainly evident. So that would be it. Thank you.
I wondered, Minia and Basir, do you actively pursue an association with the subjects of ethnography, or are those subjects a viewer may bring to the work?
I think for me it changes every time. I think it's very rarely that I approach my subjects or my work as a research. I think I'm also most of the time trying to deal with things which I already know. So it's very rarely that I have to sort of research or find something, but most of the time it's larger situations or something which struck me or something which I'm thinking about, which I reduce it down to small actions or movement or things like this. And I think I am, even though people have come in my work from certain backgrounds, but I try not to approach their identities or them through those backgrounds which are already sort of there. And I think I'm just interested in approaching them as figures, as people, as emotions, as bodies most of the time. And then again, what I said also in my presentation, I'm only interested in observing things. And I'm glad that I'm performing within the art sort of structure, that there are people who come up with meanings to what I do. So they help me to support sometimes or understand things, or platform like this. But I think what I am interested in is probably just basics of looking things.
Yeah, I think also like Basir, I don't think in that field. What I'm interested by mostly is to redetermine the narratives and to think how imaginaries have been cut and separated from their context. So in my case, in my work, I work a lot with opacity, for example, which is a very important concept coming from Edouard Glissant, the well-known now. And for me, this opacity concept allows me to provoke new meetings that can, the fact of not understanding something can be as interesting as understanding it for me. So my way of working with the topics I'm interested by is also by pushing the limits of maybe it's okay when I don't understand fully something too. So I'm not at all in that very anthropologic thinking of having a view on and being able to speak about. I think I'm really navigating, and my interest is with that, is in the imaginary of the Caribbean that is, of course, a very colonially based now imaginary, because as we know, the Caribbean is the first place where Columbus arrived, and it's also at the same time a place that will be think with the first books and the first prints and monsters and creatures from the overseas, and so a very interesting European projection of the other. So the Caribbean imaginary is weaved by that all the time. And also now with the Caribbean realities, how can we redetermine what we think? Yeah.
Laura, the two clips that we saw of your work, I'm just going to read the title so I don't get it wrong. A Journey to a Land Otherwise Unknown, which was the first clip, and La Libertad, the second clip. They played with this illusion of truth in very different ways. So in the first, you toy with this idea of humor and the illusion of truth, and you kind of explain the ethnographic approach to filmmaking as an illusion and for its own purpose. I wondered if you could talk about the differences in those two works, because for me, the second clip you showed was very much a representation and a different kind of illusion of truth, if that makes any sense.
Well, this question of truth, I'm not sure I feel comfortable with the idea of truth. I think I identify with what you said about opacity. I feel that all the struggles that I had with ethnography and my first works was that I didn't agree with the fact that we could objectively describe human beings as in categories and put in boxes living things. And and all this taxonomy was very much part of a violence that was made upon people, and we suffer today from that still. So I think that this notion of truth must be taken with a lot of care, because I think we live in times where everything is very confusing, and some people would use facts and things that happen in reality with a fictitious approach to transform our societies in very negative ways. So I wouldn't say that truth is not existent at all, because there are some things that happen in reality. But then I'm very, I feel far away from this academic impulse, to create a taxonomy in order to put people into boxes or live things into boxes. So I think I work a lot with language, actually, and with representation. And that is the main part of inspiration of my work. And the two clips that you saw, the first one is from 2011, and the last one is from 2017. So there's a long time in between. I think it made sense to show them because it is true that the relationship with indigenous communities is a strong part of my work. I come from Colombia, which is a very, very racist country, and one of the problems that we have as a nation and as a national community, I would say, is that we haven't been able to dismantle this colonial language about ourselves. And so we see each other like others, and everyone is like in their own community, and it's very difficult to have approaches that bound us together. So yes, indigenous representation has been a huge part of my work. And so I think with the Navarro family working in Mexico, where the situation has many similar things, but it's also very specific and very different, allowed me to consider my film practice otherwise. And so I felt that these things made sense. Also because we are, one last thing, we are talking about ethnography and fiction, and I feel this is a cinema history that is very male-dominated. So to me it was important as well to bring the Navarro family, which is a matriarchy, and all the questions that this raises.
Basir, focusing in perhaps on two of your more recent works, so All Voices Are Mine, and then the last example you showed, Good Ended Happily. Your relationship to truth there, in the first instance with All Voices Are Mine, if I'm correct, you asked actors to recreate scenarios that you had memories of as a child. Is that correct? And then in the other work, there is a reveal. The filmmaking is revealed as part of the film itself.
Not my personal memories, like All Voices Are Mine. The idea was that, as the title suggests, that I don't consider it completely my work. I think these are the films or sequences I asked them to re-perform, which were meant initially for some other performances, some other narratives. So what you end up having is an abrupt sort of a setup of films. Of course, it comes through a personal narrative because I'm also talking about my father, who wrote a song, and also as a film fan, as I said, it's like 10 minutes away, so my father would also take me around, walk into that neighborhood where these films were being shot. And I think it's over there, films is, like many other things, it's not within certain, it's with life, it's going on with other things or shops or other activities, and these actors, like there was one actor in my film who was shooting for Good Ended Happily, performing as an army officer, and then he said he has to go back on his duty of a police officer, which was real. So very closely they live side by side, but I also have my memories where my father would ask me to shake hand with certain actors or go and meet them or something like this. And I think that does play a role. But what I am interested in that area or in that language of film, I'm completely an outsider. I'm not a filmmaker entirely. For me, what happens within a film is very much connected what is outside of the film, all the setup. So I'm always constantly interested in opening up this whole process of making things. And again, run them as a procedure or a process, have certain idea what an outcome would be, but opening it up for other possibilities too.
Minia, we saw one example of a piece of yours. How does that relate to some of your other works? Do you follow similar subjects in your work, or are they quite self-contained?
So in my work, I do mainly installations, and my installations are space-based, so site-specific, but the plays really play a key role of, like, they are ephemeral, they cannot be repeated even at the same place in another moment. So this is like the main focus that I had, and also to think about how to create dispositives that have a narrative, but that is not an imposed narrative. So how can I guide the gaze of a spectator without actually giving it one only way to read an installation? So this I've been exploring, a lot the last years.
We've got time for some audience questions, if anyone has a question. Do we have a question from the audience?
It's so well formed, but it's something that has been going on in my mind since also the VR, XR, AR panel that we had yesterday. But two of you, I think, also sort of mentioned I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not into cinema, and it brings up this divide between the videos that we see in installations and also what's called the cinema. And so I could go on and on and on, but I just want to ask the two simple questions. How do you negotiate that space, and why do we have these divisions? How can it get better on some level? What does it mean more? Because I'm still sometimes thinking that the cinema that I see in museums it's never enough time, and how it can be better, and I'm always thinking about this when you guys are talking. And the second question I'll do very quickly is negotiating of the self. I mean, you mentioned sensory ethnographers at the lab. The ethnographers like Trin Minh Ha does a film that's completely self-reflexive, or she's completely putting herself in the ethnography, looking at, I think it was Senegali women at the time. When do you feel guilty? When do you not feel guilty? What are these issues with yourself in your film? Or do you avoid the self? Or maybe my question is no longer important. So, two questions.
This All Voices Are Mine was the first film where I had a chance to work with a film crew, where there are people who are actors, and there is a director, assistant director, cameraman, or whatever. The whole infrastructure was there. And before I would do all the things myself, I would go with the camera, I would record, come back, edit it, and perform it, or whatever I want to, installation and everything. But in this case, I had to suddenly become part of certain hierarchy. And those people somehow had this idea that I know what I'm doing. And I was completely in a doubt as an artist most of the time. You know somehow feeling when you go, in my case, when I go on set, I have certain feeling what I'm trying to achieve, but not exactly, not accurately. But they would put me on certain hierarchy that I would know what I'm going to be doing, you know? And then I started to play it another way. I started to realize that all these people who come on a film set, like the cameraman or producer or a line producer, they all know how to behave on a film set. There's some sort of an understanding they already have. How could I use that into my benefit, into run this very vague procedure which can go lost into its making? That's fine for me. And I also realized as an artist very recently that my failures could also become my successful work. So there is, let's say, not that sort of a burden of even telling a story exactly or accurately for me. Even only my intentions could become my work. And that's how I started to sort of position myself on a set in a way that they sometimes would also ask me what I would be doing there. Because I have a director, I have an assistant director, I have a producer, everything. To myself, I'm only there to see how things would run, and to be on a position of power and not to perform and let it collapse or let it become something else. And I think for this, we really probably have to see the film which I'm sort of referring to, or what I'm talking about. And that helps me, and I think I have to always sort of remind myself to have this discomfort with the process I'm involving in order to find something else, something refreshing within the process. Of course, not always a success. Sometimes it's successful or sometimes it's not. But this is how, let's say, my relation to fiction. And the other thing is, I think this whole space of cinema, it amazes me that it's like naming people. You become a police officer, you become a doctor, you become this, I would do this, let's do it together. And it amazes me that they believe on this thing, and they could perform these things, and we can believe it later on those stories. And that, I think, becomes a curiosity where I feel like I could tell any story in that space, from this Osama bin Laden story to maybe Twin Tower or something, or, I could perform that within that space because everybody could believe into these things, at least while we are making it. Later we can decide if it's believable or not. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, in my case, like for me, cinema making has a lot to do with experience, and to me, to make a film is not to gather 20 people on a film set. To me, engaging on the film process, it's almost an archaeological task, because even if I can articulate thoughts and I made a PhD, so I have an academic background, etc., all the filmmaking process is very opaque again, and it's full of darkness. And I feel like when I'm doing a film, which can last sometimes years, it's a constant altered state. And I live every shooting as an altered state. I can shoot a film with both of us, two people, but we need to get into a state of concentration that is very specific. And it's not about having a role or believing that you're a cop or whatever. It's about actually transforming yourself. And I feel that to me that process is very specific, and sometimes it leads to forms that are not commercial and that cinema industry would not appreciate as being a film. So I feel that the art world gives me space and support to also be allowed to create forms of production and propose forms that are not already existent. So yeah, I live this in-betweenness like this. And also your question about self-consciousness and feeling guilty, etc. I feel that it relates to what we were talking about with anthropology as being a science speaking about somebody. And I feel that many anthropologists, I was talking about Viveiros de Castro because he's very important in the sense that he says, no, anthropology is not about talking about someone. Anthropology is talking with a community or within a community. And he also says that it's not an act that you do by yourself in your room writing, but it's something about being present in one place and engaging on long-term relationships. And that to me means a lot. It means something. It means that the artistic elaboration is not something that I do for myself. It's something that I do within something and within a community. So of course I cannot be arriving to one place and being like, oh, I'm a fly in the wall, I'm invisible. I don't believe in that. I feel that already the fact to arrive in somewhere creates another reality that we share together. So I'm always very looking introspective, and I think it's not an easy task, and I don't feel guilty about it, but I feel more a sense of responsibility, and I feel that I fail all the time, and so this altered state experience is a transformation that never stops, and it perhaps never began, so it's just something that is going on, yes.
I would like to ask something, and first of all, thank you all for your presentations. It's so interesting, really. I would like to say that I think, as I saw a little bit of this movie, La Libertad, that maybe this question is going in this direction. How much was important for you to this haptic way of shooting this movie, or even optical inconscious? Because I'm thinking that in relation with the investigation about this anthropological photos, where is this visual control actually, how that reflected, or I think my opinion is that in a way reflects on this other movie, La Libertad, because you are inside in a way, in a tactile, not so much visual way of shooting, of, I don't know. I hope you understood.
Yes, I mean, well, yeah, it definitely had it was important to have an immersion and to have a sense of the materiality and the bodily experience that we were sharing in that particular context. But also I was interested about, during this residency, I did a workshop to learn how to weave myself. And I was fascinated how clumsy I was with my hands and incapable of doing quickly mathematics. And when these weavers do it, it goes very fast and their brain goes super fast. And I felt like that was a skill that was already, to me, completely lost. And so I was trying to convey something that was very tiny and, you know, that was related to that very specific body experience of counting and threads. And also metaphorically, as I was saying, it is supposed also to tell the links of a community. So in the film you see all these different characters that are, for one way or another, related through weaving, even though some of them are not weavers. So it was more, yes, like a visual metaphor, perhaps.
We're going to wrap up now, but we're all going to be here for a few days, so if anyone has any questions or comments they want to make one-to-one, then we're all here. But please join me in thanking our speakers.